Cayman prices have been increasing steadily during the last years. 981S prices, for example, surged by 25%. Yet, the market is cooling off now as we can see that price trends start to flatten. But this doesn't apply to all Cayman models. In this video I will show you what happened in the Cayman market and what some must-knows are before buying a Cayman in 2022. And similar to my recent 911 market update, we will be covering the full market. So this means that we'll be looking at high-level price trends per model type and won't go too far into the details. Let's start with a market overview and then continue with the price developments over time. Over here we have the US Cayman market and you can see that it's split by model type. Momentarily it consists out of 648 cars, but if you're familiar with the Cayman market, this graph has little surprises for you. On the left you can see that the 987.2 goes for a significant premium compared to the 987.1 and also is more rare. Premiums are so high that 987.2 prices are similar to 981 prices. In that market though, it are especially the GTSs that demand a large premium. They go for $20,000 more than an S model. And look how different this is in the 718 market. A GTS over there only demands a premium of $8,000. In that market it's the 4-liter GTS that really jumps out. Prices for that model are closer to the GT4 than to the rest of the market. They are even priced above the 981 GT4. And that brings up an interesting dilemma, right? Which one of the two do you pick with a $110,000 budget? Personally, I'm leaning towards the GT4, but I can imagine that some of you who use their car on a more daily basis are inclined to go for the 4-liter GTS. Anyways, you're up to date now on today's market and that means that it's time to have a look at the price developments. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, prices are topping for most models. And this is in line with what we saw in my most recent 911 market update. And you can click over here if you want to check out that video. But first I recommend that you check out the developments in the Cayman market. We'll cover each generation and model separately and we'll start with the 987. Over here we can see the median price trend for the base S and R model between August 2021 and February 2022. If we start with the most exotic one, the R, you can see that prices have been decreasing. And this is completely different from what we've been seeing in the rest of the market. Yet, I'm not relying too much on this decreasing trend. There are usually only 5 Cayman Rs for sale, which means that the trend is very sensitive to outliers. For example, between August 2021 and November 2021, the median mileage in the market increased with more than 10,000 miles, hereby explaining the price drop what you see. Hence, I view this more as a flat price development and not so much as a significant price drop. But luckily for us, we don't have this problem in the base and the S market. If we remove the R from the graph so we can see a bit better what's going on, we can see that there are some differences when it comes to the price trends. Compared to last summer, base models came down by 4%, whereas S models increased by 9%. The increase is statistically confirmed, but the decrease is not, meaning that it could be the result of chance. Or, in other words, the result of normal market fluctuations. Looking at the more recent developments, we can see that prices remained flat. The changes over here aren't large enough to say that prices really moved. Now, as a result of the difference in price developments, one basically flat and the other one increasing and topping, the premium for an S model increased from $5,000 to $9,000, and that's a significant jump. Now, a key thing to consider over here is the difference between the 987.1 and 987.2. This namely shows that it is the 987.2 S segment that drove prices up. However, we need to be careful with these results as data is limited, but let's have a look. I know that many of you are interested in this split. Over here we can see that the 987.2 S's increased with 14% during the fall, peaked and now came down with 9%. I looked a bit further into this and the price increase and decrease was only driven by a few cars. The 987.2 market segment is very small and there are points at which only 10 987.2 S's were for sale. And the situation is even worse for the base model. You can see that they were priced under 987.1 base models in November. However, this is a result of a few cars with high mileages. And with that, let's summarize quickly what we just saw in the 987 market. First, we saw that there were some price deviations between the base and S market in the fall, but that these were driven by a handful of cars. More recently though, we saw that prices are stable in both markets, and this fits within the larger market trend of price stabilizations. I do then also think that we will see a continuation of this development in the foreseeable future. Let's see if the same one goes for the 981 market, but before we move on, I would like to get your attention for today's video sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Exclusive Auctions, and if you haven't heard about them yet, you should check them out. Exclusive Auctions is a new full-service online auction platform for buying and selling sports cars, exotic cars, rare cars and specialty vehicles, and they have some really great features. For example, with their gold listing package, there are 0 seller listing fees. They also offer full-service after-sale support with everything from pre-purchase inspections and transport services to escrow services, ensuring that both buyer and seller hold up to their end of the bargain. Click on the link below or go to exclusiveauctions.com and register to bid or sell your car today. But now then, let's continue with the 981 market. Over there the price changes are slightly more aggressive, but also showing signs of stabilization. During the last 3 months, no statistically significant price changes occurred. We have from top to bottom the GT4, GTS, S and base version. And if we start at the top, we can see that GT4 prices peaked in November 2021 and since then came down by 2%. However, as I just mentioned, this price drop is not statistically confirmed. So it can be the result of chance. Consequently, I think it's too early to say that this market topped. We can see, for example, that the long-term upward price trend is still intact. Between December 2020 and now, GT4 prices increased with 12%. Moreover, the prices are still 7% higher than 6 months ago, and this increase is statistically confirmed. Interestingly, the only other market to which this also applies is the GTS market. Over there we can see that the price increase during the same period is less severe, but also that prices are still 6% higher than 6 months ago. So in line with the GT4 market, it might be so that this is the first sign of a price stabilization. But with only one data point, it's too early to call it a full market top. Look for example at the differences between the top 2 price trends and the lower 2 price trends. In the S and base market, prices decreased slightly, meaning that they are on the same level as last summer. The change between summer and now is not statistically confirmed, so it's a lot more likely that the upward price trend ended in these markets and that the market started to cool down. Unsurprisingly, it are also these markets that saw the largest price increase since January 2020. Base and S prices increased with respectively 19 and 25%. So to sum it up, I think it's fair to conclude that the 981 S and base market topped for now, but that there's more uncertainty in the GT4 and GTS market. They saw a slightly less severe price increase during the last years, and consequently, prices might still drift slightly higher. I'm not expecting a major price increase, but I think that a scenario with a minor price increase is just as likely to occur as one with no price change. For the base and S market though, I think that a stable price development is most likely. Perhaps we will even see a minor price decrease. And with that, let's have a look at the 718 market. A market in which we can also see a lot of price stabilizations. Just as in the 981 market, there are no significant price changes during the last 3 months. Though, the upward momentum is a bit stronger in this market. We have from top to bottom the GT4, 4-liter GTS, GTS, T, S and base model. Now let me start by saying that you shouldn't be worried if you own a T. The price drop what you see here is not a real price drop. Supply is extremely low in this market and recently a few cars with a high mileage came for sale, so we can't trust this price trend and I will remove it from the plot. Now then, we can see that all models behaved in a similar way. Prices were more or less stable till April 2021, then increased till the summer of last year and more recently stabilized. However, like I mentioned, the upward momentum is still stronger than in the 981 market. In all segments, with exception of the GTS one, prices are still significantly higher than 6 months ago. And remember that this isn't the case in the 981 base and S market. Over there they didn't change during the last 6 months. Yet, we also can't exaggerate this. The increases over here vary between 3 and 5%, with exception of the 4-liter GTS that saw an increase of 11%. Nevertheless, there are some differences beneath the surface. The 4-liter GTS and GT4, for example, were affected by the stop sale and supply levels are still low. If we look at the market overview graph where we have the supply, median mileage and median model year development, we can see that supply for the GT4 and 4-liter GTS increased a bit since the beginning of last year, but that the market size is still small. The base and S models, however, saw supply increases. The S market is even at the same level as what we saw during the summer of 2020. Now looking at future prices, I think it's fair to expect the same as in the 981 GTS and GT4 market. So this means either a slight increase or a stable development. I don't expect any large changes, as we can see that prices have been fairly stable during the last 6 months, with exception of the GTS market. And with that, let's wrap up and conclude. I think it's fair to say that the days of price surges are behind us, at least for the foreseeable future. Price changes, whether they're up or down, were smaller during the last 6 months than in the preceding period. Going forward, I expect that this trend will continue and that prices will stabilize on a general level. However, we saw that there were some differences between the generations and model types. 987 and 981 base and S prices were fairly stable or decreased slightly, while 981 GT4 and GTS prices still have a bit of upward momentum. And like we discussed, based on these subtle differences, price developments in the foreseeable future might deviate. Yet, the biggest surprise was perhaps the 718 market. With exception of the GTS, we saw a slight upward momentum for all models, and this is notwithstanding supply increases in the 718 base and S segments. So why is it the 718 market that appears to have the strongest upward momentum? It's pure speculation, but it could be so that 718s depreciated too hard when they were introduced. We saw that prices fell to more or less 981 levels or even below that. So the upward momentum might be a correction to this price drop. But what do you think? Why do 718s continue to trend up? Is it a coincidence or is there more behind it? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, let me know in the comment section for which car you would like to see an analysis. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. Don't forget to subscribe and to click on the notification bell so you get notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.